Who are the greatest names to ever play for the LA Kings? It might not be what you think on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also, one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show that recaps the night in the NHL during the offseason. We're previewing all 32 teams. And I'm also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. So if you listened to our previous show, talked about the Ducks losing to the Kings in the 2014 playoffs, also mentioned during that show that we had a scheduled interview that had to be rescheduled. I reached out to a couple of people to see if maybe they could step in, but did not hear back. And not unusual, especially for this time of the off season. People are not easy to get a hold of. That's why I usually try and schedule our interviews well in advance. So we will not have an interview today. I've had to make a last second adjustment. That's fine. Today we're going to get into something that I enjoy and I've been kind of playing around with as a possible topic for an off-season show. Obviously, the news is limited at this time. So we're trying to do some different things, some specialty shows, trying to have some fun as well. And I was thinking about the greatest names to play for the LA Kings. And I don't mean the greatest players to play for the Kings. I'm talking about literally the names. Like, I love old hockey names, old sports names, really. And anytime I hear an old random player's name that I haven't thought of in a long time, it always makes me smile. So on today's show, I'm going to give you my LA Kings all-time name team. Now, this is a very subjective list. Now, some of these names I feel very strongly about. These are just great names. They're memorable names. They're legendary names just because of their names. And some of them are just fun. They're fun to say. They're different, memorable to be sure. And this is not based on anything to do with their performance. It's literally just if they have a cool name. The only requirement was that they had to have played at least one game at some point for the LA Kings. Now, how I went about this was you can go on the internet, you can type in all-time Kings roster, and you can find an alphabetical list of every NHL player who's ever played for the Kings. And all I did was kind of scroll through it slowly. I wrote down any name that kind of caught my eye. And then from that list, I kind of whittled it down to a smaller list. And I'm going to make it easy. We're going to have 12 forwards. We're going to have 6 defensemen, and we're going to have 2 goalies. This is going to be my all LA Kings list of names. I'm sure there are going to be some that slip through the cracks. I'm sure there are going to be some that you might think, well, how is that person not listed in this? Again, this is my list. I can't guarantee you that I didn't accidentally overlook someone, but I think this is a pretty good list. And just to make it a little more informative as well, we're going to tell you not just the name, but also give you a little information about that player. And if we can, a fun fact about that player as well. So when I did this, I learned a little bit as well. I hope you do too. So let us begin with the forwards, and we will have some honorable mentions as well. And I will also mention this. I am a huge fan of alliteration. If your first and last name begin with the same letter, you're probably going to be on this list. I love those names. For example, I think one of the greatest examples of one of these names as a hockey player, and would be on my all-time NHL name team, would be Zarly Zalapski. Great hockey name, fun name to say, and how can you go wrong when your first and last name start with a Z? So with that in mind, we're going to give you our first list of the 6 forwards for the LA Kings. And this first, we're going to go in alphabetical order. And this first player, I feel very strongly about. Some of these other guys, it may just be, I think their name sounds cool or I like saying it. This guy, to me, though, has it all. Great name, unique name. He's got the alliteration, even throw in a great nickname. And our first player is a recent LA King, Andreas Athanasiou. And also the nickname Grease Lightning because of his Greek heritage, Greece as in the country Grease Lightning. Awesome nickname. He's got a fun name. It sounds great. And also Grease Lightning, also, referred to, Grease Lightning as in fast. And he was a fast player. So Andreas Athanasiou kind of had it all. Now he only played 75 games for the Kings in the early 2020s, but was a fun player to watch. Was kind of all offense and not much else. He's still trying to hang around in the NHL. He only played 8 games last season with the Blackhawks. He played a lot of games in the AHL, and he's kind of at that point in his career where he's just hoping to get an NHL job. But most likely, if he wants to keep playing, he still has the skill. He could be an AHL player. He could play in Europe. But his NHL playing days may very well be over. He's currently an unsigned free agent. A fun fact about Andreas Athanasiou, his girlfriend is a professional golfer named Nelly Corda. She's won 15 LPGA Tour victories. So maybe not the best athlete that would be as far as the couple between Andreas Athanasiou and Nelly Corda. But great name to lead it off. AA, Andreas Athanasiou. The next guy only played 1 game for the LA Kings. That was in the 2009-10 season, 6 seasons in the AHL for the Kings, for the then Manchester Monarchs. He ended up playing a total of 151 NHL games, 150 of them for the Colorado Avalanche as a forward. His name, Marc-Andre Cliche. In 2007, he was traded by the New York Rangers to the LA Kings along with Jason Ward and Jan Merrick in exchange for Sean Avery and John Seymour. He was then later claimed off waivers by the Avalanche in 2013, where he played most of his career. Marc-Andre Cliche is on my LA Kings all-name team. How about one you're probably a lot more familiar with? That would be Adam Deadmarsh. Played 114 games with the Kings, his final seasons in the NHL, which unfortunately ended prematurely because of concussion issues. But despite his brief time in a Kings uniform, he'll forever be remembered as a Kings playoff hero, playing a key role in LA's victory over the Detroit Red Wings in the 2001 conference quarterfinals. He scored a third period goal to tie up the deciding Game 6 and then scored the overtime sudden death game winner to eliminate Detroit and advance the Kings into the next round of the playoffs. That Detroit team, by the way, their GM was current Kings GM Ken Holland. A fun fact about Adam Deadmarsh: won the Stanley Cup in 1998 with the Colorado Avalanche, and his name on the cup was misspelled. Instead of Deadmarsh, they had Deadmarch. It was later corrected, and apparently it was the first correction ever made on the Stanley Cup. Adam Deadmarsh. I actually have an Adam Deadmarsh jersey, one of the few jerseys I have that is not a Kings legend, if you will. Up next, hard to go wrong with the alliteration and the one-syllable names, Dick Duff. Okay, his real name is Terrence Richard Duff, but he went by Dick Duff, and he's still alive, 89 years old. Dick Duff, Hall of Famer, 6-time Stanley Cup winner, mostly with the Toronto Maple Leafs, played only 39 games for the Kings late in his career in the early 70s. I may have brought up his name when I was talking about LA Kings Hall of Famers, and I had mentioned there are a handful of players who were in the Hall of Fame who played for the Kings, but they weren't Kings Hall of Famers like, some of the other guys like Rob Blake, like Luke Robitaille. Those are Kings Hall of Famers. Dick Duff, not one of those guys, but Dick Duff is on the team. Short, sweet, and he sounds like a private eye. Dick Duff is on the case of the missing wife or something like that, or maybe a plumber. You got a clogged toilet called Dick Duff. Anyway, up next, how about Stu Grimson? Stu Grimson, only 1 season with the LA Kings, but he was a 14-year veteran, played 72 games for LA in the 2000-2001 season, racked up 235 penalty minutes. Another phenomenal nickname, the Grim Reaper. He amassed over 2,000 career penalty minutes. And despite his fierce reputation on the ice, he was a born-again Christian. He went to school after his playing career was over, earned a law degree, and you can now see a very gentle and articulate Stu Grimson these days as an analyst on the NHL Network. Stu Grimson on my LA Kings all-name team. This is a pretty one. Kyosti Karjalainen. Kyosti Karjalainen. Kyosti Karjalainen. It's got the alliteration. It kind of flows. I thought he was a Finnish player, but in fact, maybe of Finnish descent, but he was born in Sweden and is a resident of Sweden. A 7th-round pick of the Kings in 1987. Only played 28 games for the Kings during the 1991-92 season. Only had one career goal in the NHL. That was as the member of the LA Kings. He would go on to play many seasons afterwards over in Europe, including his native Sweden. Kyosti Karjalainen. We've got 6 more forwards to get to, including a Hockey Hall of Famer. That is next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. FanDuel tracks your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether it's a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're a part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Continuing with our all LA Kings name team, the most fun, entertaining names in the history of the LA Kings. Up next on our forward list is Jari Kurri, the only other member of my LA Kings all name team that's in the Hall of Fame other than Dick Duff. 5-time Stanley Cup winner with the Edmonton Oilers was Jari Kurri. One of the group of the famous Oilers that would end up migrating to LA along with Wayne Gretzky, or shortly thereafter. Paul Coffey would probably be in that discussion too. Jari Kurri probably, I would say, would be the second biggest name of those Oilers defectors that joined the Kings. Played 5 years in LA, 331 games, and Kurri finished his career as the highest scoring European-born and trained player in NHL history with 601 goals and 1,398 points. Jari Kurri. Up next, Lonnie Loesch. Lonnie only played 56 career NHL games, 50 of them with the Kings in the 1992-93 season. He was a left winger, had 10 career goals, all scored while as a member of the Kings. He would amass over 1,000 professional hockey games, but mostly played in the now defunct International Hockey League. Fun fact, most of his first season in the Kings, or his only season playing in LA with the Kings, he played on a line with another rookie, now Kings head coach, Jim Hiller. Lonnie Loesch. I think this one had to be expected by most of you who were Kings fans of any length of time. This is a great name, definitely an all-time great Kings name, and a pretty damn good player too, and that would be Zygmunt Palffy, better known as Ziggy. 311 games with the LA Kings, part of the LAPD line with Adam Deadmarsh and Jason Allison. Ziggy was a really crafty little fun sniper, traded to LA along with Brian Smolinski for Olli Jokinen, Josh Green, and Matthew Baron, and a first-round draft pick. A couple of pretty big names there. Ziggy played 12 years in the NHL. Fun fact, Zygmunt Palffy was the flag bearer for his native Slovakia at the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, which he came out of retirement to compete in. Those of you remember Ziggy Palffy, always a fan favorite. Zygmunt Palffy is definitely on the LA Kings all-time name team. This next guy I just thought was a fun name to say. Just sounds fun to say, and that would be Alexei Ponikarovsky. Played just 1 year for the Kings, 61 games during the 2010-11 season. would go on to play 678 career NHL games, mostly with the Maple Leafs. One of his nicknames was pretty cool, the Ukraine Train. That would be Alexei Ponikarovsky. This next name is just kind of fun, and it's the alliteration again. I can't resist it, but how about Tim Tukey? T-O-O-K-E-Y. Tim Tukey played forward in the NHL, 106 games, just 27 with the LA Kings in the late 80s. Originally a native of Edmonton, he was drafted by the Washington Capitals in the 5th round of 1997. Fun fact, Tim Tukey is the 4th all-time leading scorer in the history of the American Hockey League with 974 career points and is a member of the AHL Hall of Fame. I got to be honest, I didn't even know there was an AHL Hall of Fame, but I guess that makes sense when you really think about it. I don't know who else is in the AHL Hall of Fame, but I do know Tim Tukey is in there. He's also in my LA Kings all-name Hall of Fame, apparently. And our last of the forwards is David Vandergulik. And sometimes you see these names and you try and wonder, where's that guy from? Turns out he's from British Columbia. So I thought maybe he was Dutch or something. And, probably somewhere in his heritage could be. But David Vandergulik, I played for the LA Kings in the 2014-15 season. It was his last NHL game, and his only NHL game for the Kings was during that season. He was an AHL call-up from the Manchester Monarchs. Played a total of 49 NHL games with the Kings, Flames, and Avalanche. And David Vandergulik, former star player at Boston University, one of a number of BU players to play in the National Hockey League. All right, there were some other names I did want to mention. Honorable mentioned forwards in the LA Kings list of all-time names. How about Peter Ahola? Every time I saw that name, I wanted to say Aloha, but no, it's Peter Ahola. How about Syl Apps Jr., his father, very famous NHLer who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but his son played with the LA Kings. Steve Klippingdale is on an honorable mention. Mikko Eloranta, I actually have his autograph on an old jersey that I took one time to a Kings event and had a bunch of guys sign it. None of them were stars. They were all kind of like Mikko Eloranta. How about Len Hatchborn, UC Jokinen, Oli Jokinen, who we mentioned earlier, Dmitry Kristich, Brian Kilray, Trent Klatt, Mike Kruzhelniski, Ian LaPerriere, Rial Lemieux, Andrei Loktianov, Vladislav Nagy, Kai Nurmanen, Brandy Semchuk, Patrice Tardif, Tyler Toffoli, Vladimir Splikov, Vic Vanaski, Roman Vopat, and Vitaly Yachmanev. Some honorable mentions, fun names to say, fun names to look at, maybe not to spell, as far as our LA Kings all-name team. We still have our 6 defensemen and 2 goalies coming up. I got to believe you know who one of the goalies is going to be if you're talking about cool names, especially for a goalie. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. All right, we've got our 6 defensemen and 2 goaltenders to name for our all LA Kings name team. And alliteration has struck again. How about Davis Druiski? Played 126 games for the Kings in the late 2000s, including 9 games in the Stanley Cup winning season of 2012. But he never saw any time in the playoffs. However, the organization thought enough of him to petition to put his name on the Stanley Cup, which it is. If you look at the Stanley Cup 2012 champions, LA Kings, Davis Druiski has his name forever immortalized on the Stanley Cup. Probably one of the more anonymous names on a Stanley Cup for a team. But he was, and he is. Later got into coaching, I heard. Don't know what he's up to these days. But former captain of the hockey team at the University of Wisconsin, Davis Druiski. How about Vladislav Gavrikov? It just flows, right? It's a pretty name to say. One of only 2 members of this all-name team that are currently still NHL players. Gabby played 179 games over 3 seasons for LA before, of course, leaving this offseason for the New York Rangers. Came over to the LA Kings in the infamous Jonathan Quick trade with Columbus in 2023, along with goalie Jonas Korpisalo, Vladislav Gavrikov, fun name to say. This is a good name for a hard-hitting defenseman, although I don't know if he was that. How about Grant Ledyard? Played over 1,000 NHL games, 142 with the Kings in the late 80s, with a defensive defenseman, and all played for 9 different NHL teams, including 5 years in Dallas and 5 years in Buffalo. Grant Ledyard. How about Marty McSorley? Again, sucker for the alliteration, but a fun name to say. Marty McSorley, 2-time Stanley Cup winner in Edmonton, but the bulk of his career, 17-year career, was with LA, suiting up for the Kings for 472 games. Best known for being Wayne Gretzky's bodyguard. Certainly was a guy who would not be afraid to drop the gloves at any moment, but really notable for 2 moments in Kings history. One positive, not so much. The other one had the primary assist on Wayne Gretzky's record-breaking 802nd NHL goal, which made him at the time the NHL's all-time leading goal scorer. I can still hear Bob Miller saying McSorley to Gretzky. Of course, had the other infamous thing that Marty McSorley known for, the illegal stick in the Stanley Cup playoffs, 1993, which unfortunately allowed the Montreal Canadiens to get a power play, pull their goalie for the extra attacker, the 2-man advantage. They scored the tying goal, then win game 1 in overtime. Or was it game 2, actually? I think it was game 2, actually, because the Kings were going to come home, we thought, up 2-0, and we kind of were thinking, oh, this may be the year, but it was not to be. But Marty McSorley, I will say, for a guy who had such an infamous moment, certainly still, I think, seems to me anyway, to be very well still liked by most Kings fans. I know he did beat the drum there before one of the playoff games this year and got a good ovation. Still lives in the LA area. Marty McSorley, all-time career penalty minutes leader for the LA Kings, 1,846. He's on my all-name team, Marty McSorley. How about Ian Turnbull? He was a defenseman for the LA Kings for just one season, 42 games for LA in the 1981-82 season after being traded from the Maple Leafs. I learned some things about Ian Turnbull. It was very cool. Only 6 defensemen in NHL history have had 4 goals or more in a game. Ian Turnbull did it twice, including the only 5-goal game by an NHL defenseman. He did it with the Maple Leafs in 1977 against the Red Wings. I would have thought Bobby Orr would be on that list, but nope. Orr had some hat tricks, but he never had a 4-goal game, and only one person, Ian Turnbull, had the 5-goal game. And he also has the only 4-goal game by a defenseman in LA Kings history in a 7-5 win over the Canucks. He was able to do it for the LA Kings. And I also saw on his Wikipedia page, it says he works at a Chevy dealership in Torrance. So if you're getting your car serviced at a Chevy dealership in Torrance, look for Ian Turnbull. Shake that man's hand. That is an NHL historic player. 5 goals in a game as a defenseman. Ian Turnbull. Good stuff. This final defenseman is probably the most controversial player on the list. Not probably, he is. And it's not because of his name. It's not because of how he played, but something that happened off the ice. And that would be Vyacheslav Voinov, better known as Slava. All of his 190 career NHL games are with the LA Kings, who drafted him in the second round in 2008. But unfortunately for Slava, he was arrested in 2014, not that long after helping the Kings win their second Stanley Cup title, charged with domestic violence against his girlfriend. He was charged with a felony. He was immediately suspended by the league, never played in the NHL again. He eventually pleaded no contest to the charges. The Kings terminated his contract. He went to Russia to play professionally. There's always thought maybe he could return after a few years. Never happened. So Vyacheslav Voinov. Tough to get 2 names that start with a V, your first and last name, but he pulled it off. Not a very pretty way, the way obviously his career ended, not only in the NHL but with the Kings, but that name, we're just talking about names now, and Vyacheslav Voinov is on my all-name team for the LA Kings. I did see the Kings had another player who had a first and last name that started with a V. and that was Vic Vanaski, who I met. He used to coach and own a pro shop at the Skating Edge ice rink in Harbor City, where I used to play. And yeah, I had no idea. I knew I had heard, Vic played for the Kings back in the day, but he actually had a good career with the LA Kings. I think he's top 20 in like all-time points or all-time goals, something like that. He's at more than just a cup of coffee. Vic Vanaski, honorable mention, Vic Vanaski on our all-name team. Some other honorable mentions as far as defensemen go of names that I thought were pretty funny or cool or whatever. Keaton Ellerby. How about Doug Huda? Charlie Huddy, Frantisek Cabriolet, that's pretty. Dion Phaneuf, Oleg Tverdovsky, Dmitry Yushkevich, and Alexei Zhitnik. Last but not least, we have our two goalies on the LA Kings all-time name team, and this one should surprise no one, Jonathan Quick. I mentioned Yari Curry and Dick Duff are the only two members of this team that are currently in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Of course, Jonathan Quick will be there one day once he retires, but like Vladislav Gavrikov, the only other active member on our list, he is the LA Kings franchise leader in every major category for a goaltender, two-time Stanley Cup winner. He is the greatest goalie in LA Kings history. And how can you go wrong as a goalie with the last name of Quick? And I guess if you're a fast player, that would be a great name as well. But maybe the coolest goalie name in NHL history, Jonathan Quick. And our final player, the number 2 goalie on our all-name team, Yutaka Fukufuji. 8th round pick of the Kings in 2004. He was the first Japanese player to appear in an NHL game. He played in 4 games for the LA Kings during the 2006-2007 season. Unfortunately, that was the only 4 games of his career, and he didn't get a win. He went 0-3 in those 4 games. But Yutaka Fukufuji, great name, unique name, certainly for the sport of hockey, and he is definitely our backup goalie on the all LA Kings name team. Yutaka Fukufuji had been playing in Japan as recently as the 2023-24 season, so was still playing, still hanging around, playing some competitive goal over in his native Japan. But apparently, it looks like he's finally decided to hang up the pads. Some honorable mentions as far as other goalie names that have played at one time for the LA Kings. How about Rene Chapdelaine? The French names are always fun to say. Roman Czechmanek, Cristobal Huet, Rick Knickel, and Manny Legacy. Was there a name that I left out that you think should have been in there? If so, and you want to share that, feel free to chime in on our fan feedback show. I hope you enjoyed this. I will admit it was a little bit thrown together kind of last second, but I thought it was fun, which is what this is supposed to be all about. I did learn some things as well. The Ian Turnbull thing was very, very cool. I will never forget that. So hope you guys enjoyed this as well. For you everydayers, those of you listening to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, our next show is going to be our fan feedback show, your chance to submit questions or share your thoughts about anything we talked about this week or anything involving the LA Kings. We got the Ian LePerriere contract. I just saw Kyle Clifford apparently has announced his retirement. So another player from the championship teams has hung it up. Not many left in the NHL. If you want to get in on the feedback show, the email address lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. If you're watching on YouTube, we welcome your comments in the comment section as well. And we'd love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. And if you want some extra Kings content and support your host as well, send me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com. We'll get you the information on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.